The next item we have for your consideration is ordinance 2015-56. This is an ordinance amending the code. Again, Title 7, Chapter 5, Article D. This is for water and sewer regulations, fees, rates, and charges. Section 7-5D-2A, 1, 7-5D-2B, 1, 7-5D-2B, 2, and 7-5D 3A. Now this item, and Nadine has another quick presentation to provide some background and an overview of this topic, but again, we've had significant conversations about this with the village board, and we know that this is something that is of great concern to the residents and the elected officials. So we're going to provide a quick overview of the reasons why we are proposing the water and sewer rate increases.
Thank you very much. As Administrator Rush mentioned, back in October 15th's board meeting, we had a budget workshop, and at that time, we reviewed the water and sewer fund's current fiscal condition, the proposed 2016 budget, as well as the 10-year outlook. And at that time, we also reviewed the proposed 2016 water and sewer rate increases. And at the time, preliminary feedback of the board was given a couple options on the rates. They chose the lower option of 26-cent increase to the water rate, a 3% increase to customer service charge, and a 3-cent increase to the wastewater maintenance fee. I'd like to start out by just talking about the three components. So there's three components to the village's water bill, and the first being our metered water usage. Now the village charges a rate per 1,000 gallons, and that's on the actual water that is used, and the current rate is $7.92. Now this charge is used to pay for several things. It's used to pay to the village's cost to purchase our Lake Michigan water from the City of Chicago, which is through the DuPage Water Commission. Now the DuPage Water Commission buys the water from the city of, and then bills us for that cost, and then they also add costs on their own, that is to provide the infrastructure that wheels the water from the city all the way to our homes. It also is used to pay for the village's cost of water operations, and this would include administrative costs for things such as salaries and for water department employees, costs to fund the maintenance and replacement of the water infrastructure and equipment, as well as professional services for things such as leak detection and leak repair and engineering services. The second component is the village's customer service charge. Now this is the fixed piece of the bill. Now this charge is not based on usage, but rather on the meter size, and it's a bi-monthly charge. The most common meter size for a residential home is 5/8 inch, and some newer homes will have a 3/4 inch and possibly even a 1-inch meter. Now, the size of the meter is dependent on the size of the water lines that are in the house. So the bigger the home with more water fixtures, you're likely to see a larger water meter in the home. But on the right-hand side of the slide here is the current customer service charges that are in place now. And the purpose of this charge is really to provide fund stability. This is a constant revenue source, unlike those that are tied to usage, which can vary from year to year due to a number of variables. And it's a very important component of our rate structure. The third component is the village's charge for a wastewater maintenance fee. Now this rate is also charged per 1,000 gallons, and it's based on residents' water consumption. The current rate is 87 cents per 1,000 gallons, and like the water charge, it is used to provide or to pay for a variety of services. It covers the administrative costs for sewer operations, costs for regular maintenance and replacement of wastewater infrastructure and equipment, costs to run the 5 lift stations in the village that pump the wastewater to the treatment facility in DuPage County, and various professional services that are sewer related, such as smoke testing that's done to look for infiltration of rainwater into the system. Important to note here, though, that this does not include the cost to treat the wastewater. That is done by DuPage County, and they receive a separate bill for those costs. Okay, this slide here, let's take a look at the history of the water and sewer rates. And I thought it was important to point this out. As you can see on this slide, the village's water and sewer rates stayed mostly the same for many years. So from 1994 to 2010, and that's really quite a long period of time to have no adjustment to the rates. But there are some really good reasons for that. At the time, we had a younger system, and so we had less maintenance and infrastructure needs. We hadn't established a capital funding program. We also had a fairly healthy fund balance that could absorb fluctuations in usage or dollars. And there was little change to one of our major cost components, and that was the cost to purchase the water. And our usage at that time was fairly predictable. We didn't have such a focus on conservation, and there were more regular weather patterns. And so when we were predicting usage, we didn't have major variables in that from year to year. Then in 2009, 2010 timeframe, it was kind of like the perfect storm, and all these things came together at once. First, we saw a reduction in our fund balance, and that was due to the separation of the Santa Fe money from the Water and Sewer Fund. We also began experiencing lower consumption, which was reducing our revenues. We were seeing increased maintenance needs and capital expenditures. And so the village had to start adjusting the village's sides of the rates. And then it just happened at the same time that both the DuPage Water Commission as well as the City of Chicago were also experiencing their own issues. And so at that time, they put in place a series of actually very significant water rate increases to happen over the next 5 years. And you could see quite literally in this graph here the steep incline that we had seen since 2011. So I wanted to review a little bit about how we determine rates each year. Now, staff consistently monitors this fund, and usage really is key. We constantly watch our usage. We are comparing our usage with historical and seasonal water trends. We want to see how we're doing from month to month. We review the difference between the water that's consumed and the water that we bill out, and that's our unbilled water loss, and it's an extremely important component that we monitor very closely. We also look at the fund's performance and what our operating margins are. We look to monitor development, so that's are there any new customers that are coming onto the system? And actually this should result in increased revenues and increased usage because there's more customers in the system. But with that also comes increased cost to provide the service, as well as upkeep and maintenance and improvement needs for those new areas of town. Now, all of these are analyzed. We look at our current and future capital needs. We also perform leak detection semi-annually to determine if there's leaks in the system. We want to try and keep our system as tight as possible to reduce our unbilled water loss. We prepare a budget for the upcoming year. We look at a 5-year capital plan. We also look at our current rates, and we determine any adjustment that we need in order to keep the fund stable, to work towards our 25% fund balance that we have per our fund balance policy, and look to have funding not only for our current capital needs, but those in the future as well. So as I just mentioned, usage really is the main driver here of the water and sewer bus. And as you can see from this graph, this is our usage that we've been seeing since 2007. And you can see here that it's been declining. In 2007, we were almost at 1.2 billion gallons a year. And by 2014, we saw a considerable drop, and we were just a little above 1 billion gallons. And now in 2015, our year is almost ended. We expect to have just a little over 900 million gallons of consumption, and that is already including our peak periods, which would have been the summertime. That's a 10% drop this year. Now, we are not the only community that is faced with this. There are others that are struggling, and they're having to adjust their rates just as we are. And also some of them are even looking to reevaluate their rate structure. Some of them are looking for a more fixed component so that they don't have these fluctuations and it's not tied to usage, so that they can stabilize their revenues. And this actually is something that does impact our rates. So let's take a look at what else has been impacting the water and sewer fund. We also have this increased cost to purchase water that I spoke to just briefly earlier. We have aging infrastructure. We're looking to stabilize our fund, and as I mentioned just now, we have seen reduced consumption. So let's talk a little bit about the cost to purchase this Lake Michigan water. And I talked about this earlier when we looked at the history graph. So not only in 2009 and 10 did we start having to adjust our own rates, the City of Chicago and DuPage Water Commission has passed these 5 years worth of significant rate increases that you see on this slide here. So in just 5 short years, we went from $2.08 per 1,000 gallons to almost $5. Now that's more than double, and based on 1 billion gallons annually, that carries a cost of $2.8 million. This graph shows the impact of those increases on our water rate directly. So actually, if you look at this slide here, from 2005 through 2008, the village's portion of the rate was actually more than the cost to purchase the water. Then you begin to see some leveling out in 2008. Between 2008 and 2010, the DuPage Water Commission began to slightly adjust their rates. Then beginning in 2011, we had this massive increase in the cost to buy the water, and so now almost 64% of the rate is just to purchase the water. And we have had some increases to the village's side, but it has stayed relatively constant. And here's just another way of looking at this cost. And so here on this graph, you see back in 2005, the cost to purchase the water was $1.9 million, and it equaled 29% of our then annual budget of $6.5 million. In 2014, about 10 years later, the cost to purchase the water was $4.4 million, and that share of the pie has now grown to 45% of a total annual budget of $9.7 million. So in addition to seeing rising costs to purchase the water, we are also dealing with our increasing need for infrastructure improvements and maintenance. Now we have a system now that is about 55 plus years in some of the oldest parts of town, and there's a need now to allocate dollars to regular preventative maintenance. Now this includes replacement of our valves and hydrants and equipment, sewer main cleaning, smoke testing and lining, as well as leak detection. Now this is efforts in order to keep a tight system and reduce our unbilled water loss. And without these expenditures, we would start seeing many more water main breaks. And water main breaks are costly not only in repair, but also in the amount of water loss that can happen in a short period of time. And also we would start seeing more inflow and infiltration into our system that needlessly, unnecessarily taxes our system. So speaking of the unbilled water loss, this ties directly into that, our infrastructure needs. Now some unbilled water loss is expected, and it's going to happen in every system. We have loss for firefighting and hydrant flushing, as well as new construction that's going up. And these would typically be in a range about 3 to 4% annually. There's also going to be water loss from water leaks. Even in the tightest of systems, there will be some leakage. Now, the village's annual average unbilled water loss is about 10%. And so it's why it's important that our maintenance of our system and putting sufficient funding towards that to keep our system tight and reduce this is so very important. We also have a fund balance that is currently at about 13%. And if you look at that slide here, it's the third column, and it's the purple line that goes across. This 13% of fund balance is well below the 25% required fund balance as per our fund balance policy. And we also have net current assets, or really our cash in this fund, of about $1.3 million. Now you can see these are projections going out into the future. You do see that we do get up to that 25% level at 2020. And these are anticipating, or do at this time include, incremental annual increases to the rates in order to get us to that point. Now, fund stability is crucial. It is needs to have dollars there. We need to have this savings account in order to be able to handle and respond to unforeseen circumstances or emergencies in any given year. Okay, so we've looked at how the rates are determined, and we reviewed what has been impacting our water and sewer fund. So now let's review our proposed 2016 rates. Now, staff does not take rate increases lightly. Considerable time is spent. We compile and analyze information. We look at various scenarios. We vet our assumptions. We try to fine-tune our projections as best as possible. Our approach is really to have a sound water and sewer fund that can address not only our current and future needs, but one that has a plan. Looking at this, first up is the water rate. Proposed for 2016 is a 26-cent increase to the water rate. It would bring our current rate from $7.92 per thousand gallons to $8.18. Also proposed is a 3% increase to the customer service charge, which again is that fixed rate. This is here shown on this slide is based off of a 5/8 inch meter, which is the most common residential size. The amount of this charge will vary by size, but here for a typical resident, the current charge bi-monthly is $16.15, and that would go up to $16.63. We also are proposing a 3-cent increase to the sewer maintenance fee. Currently, it is 87 cents per 1,000 gallons, and that would go up to 90 cents. Now, the monthly impact to the average customer using approximately 5,400 gallons monthly is $2.04, or about $25 annually. Are there any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yes, Trustee Abbott.
Has the DuPage Water Commission set their rate for 2016 yet?
I have not seen anything finalized. I don't know if anyone, I have not seen anything final yet.
There
Do
hasn't
you
been
ha-
anything on their agenda.
No, I haven't seen anything yet.
So do we know roughly, any idea when they would?
They typically do their adjustments in December, effective for January.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Abbott. Any other questions? Trustee Martinez?
Just a comment. If I understood correctly from the discussions we had over the last few weeks, we cannot use any other revenue or funds to cover repairs related to infrastructure dealing with water. It has to come from the water fund. Is that correct?
Ideally, it is to come from the Water and Sewer Fund. If you're looking to do one-time improvement or something like that, you could look to take it. The challenge is, where would you take that money from? The challenge is also, you're exactly correct, is that water rates are supposed to support this Water and Sewer Fund. They're the users of the system, and they need to support this system. In speaking with the auditors, if we were to start subsidizing, and I did contact and do an informal survey and was not able to see, I talked to about 10 different communities, none of them are subsidizing. But if this board so chose to, they could do something like that, although it would not be recommended to do that. It would impact, you would see a comment in the audit, and it would impact, it could potentially impact our rate, bond rating and things like that as well. So it's not a good sign if you cannot have this fund self-sustaining.
But again, as I mentioned before, real estate taxes, number one, water rates, number two, as a concern to the residents of this community. So I think it's concerning to me anyway when I see the potential increase for 2016. And as we look forward the next 5 years, I even get more concerned.
Right. And I understand that the challenge is, where would you take those revenues from? So if, for instance, it's a general fund and you take revenues from there, then what is going to replace those revenues that are taken from that? So it's a
There's a
challenge.
limited amount of dollars available, and this is a very difficult spot for elected officials. The trustees have to consider both their fiduciary responsibility to address the needs of the water system, and yet there's an interest and a strong desire to respond to the concerns of the residents who find this to be burdensome. There's very limited, and there's competing dollars, competing demands for services, and to provide resources to those services, and it's not an enviable position.